Now, what's the use gonna be in that end of the building?
Same as it is now, basically machining,
Machining?
yeah,
Okay.
machine shop, fabrication.
Yeah, because it goes over into the C3 zoning district. In the C3, the machining use is not a use by right. And that's what really they're asking for an opinion on tonight is, whether or not the township would allow them to go do that, or whether they should seek zoning relief to, get that use approval to go into the C3 zoning district.
What would we have to change in our ordinances to allow a property like this? Because there are others where the majority of the property is in one zoning district, but a slight, part of it extends into a different zoning where it might not be an allowed use. Is there any way to change that?
Well, there's a paragraph in the ordinance now, it's section 402B, no, I'm sorry, 4029, that basically allows as a special exception the zoning hearing board to approve an extension of a use from one zoning district into a neighboring zoning district, but it only says 50 feet. So, I mean, you already have a paragraph that sort of does what you're talking about, Alan. It's a matter of, you would need to modify that to either extend that or to modify it as a use by condition or right, or however you want to do that. But you could modify that paragraph to make that change, and allow that.
I think like in an instance like this, it should be conditioned by right. Because the property's so large, the zoning district goes through a slight, a quarter of it?
Right.
And it's affecting their, ability to move forward without extra, attention from the township.
Well, that number 9 is how you would solve that. I like, we call them bleeding provisions, where you let the use bleed over into the other district, but only by so many feet. To me, the 50 feet, it looks like they're beyond the 50 feet. I see a 45-foot mark there, and we're beyond that.
Yeah, we're about 100 feet. The first, where you get to the corner, that's about 100 feet, and then that's about another 100 feet.
So they need 100 feet. So you would need to do a zoning text amendment to increase that from 50 feet to 100 feet. You're saying 100?
A little more than that.
I would say 150 would cover the extension on this one.
Now, that would work with them, but that would be effective township-wide. So then we give anybody else that same right to bleed over 100 or 150 feet, whatever that number ends
Could
up
we go a
being.
percentage of the overall building? Like this would be less than 50% of their overall building, you know what I
Maybe
mean?
less than 75%.
Yeah.
This is definitely less than 50%.
It's less than 25.
This right here is 50%. And you're talking about a quarter of 50, you're talking about maybe even a quarter of 50%.
I don't know,
Yeah.
the size of the overall building, it's like.
Oh, the size of the overall building is
yeah,
probably
it's
only
small.
maybe like 10-15%.
The other
If you're
property,
talking about square footage wise, you can calculate that out, much now.
yeah, we have another property we seen recently, the one at Turnpike Interchange. That's 2 different zoning districts, right? Yeah, I forget what we had to do there, but, it probably comes into play on many of the bigger properties in our township, right?
So can we say 50 feet or less than a certain percentage of the
Yeah,
business?
yeah, do a percentage or.
Yeah.
So instead of changing that, we
The answer is yes. You could, it's a matter of figuring out exactly what, where you want to draw that limit. What's, is it 25%, 30% of the square footage of the existing building?
The other request here is Hillside has the immediate need to get this building up as fast as possible because of the business. Either if we could submit for a zoning variance and simultaneously submit the land development plan. And not really step forward.
You can absolutely do that. I mean, until the zoning variance would get resolved. I mean, you'd still be going through the plan process.
Work through the land development process.
Yeah,
Work through, I don't know that I would require variance. I think I would amend the zoning ordinance itself to correct it so that a variance would not be required.
You think that'd be a quicker process?
It's probably just as quick one way or the other, but you gotta worry about whether they can meet a standard for a variance or not, whether there's an undue hardship. Rather than make them try to meet that standard, I would just assume modify the ordinance to allow it. They don't need to attend a hearing and put on evidence and try to meet that standard. The other thing that this bleeding provision does, in paragraph 9, is require a special exception. And you have a right to do that and keep that there. That's not always in these kinds of ordinances or these provisions, where you allow them to bleed over by 100 feet or 50 feet. You could do that by right without requiring a special exception. Frankly, I don't know what the standard would be for the zoning hearing board to evaluate whether they're entitled to the special exception, because there's no standard in here. What do they have to meet to justify special exception? Right now, I read it and it suggests that they have to meet nothing. It's just filing a paper and having a hearing and spending money and time.
it would be better to remove the special exception requirement and just, modify the distance or the
Footage or percentage.
percentage of
Yeah.
existing buildings.
I'd rather read and or less than
Yeah.
if it's an existing building,
Mhm.
can't be new building.
Okay. Okay.
Or I should say new business, can't be a new business.
So do you want them to file an application for zoning text amendment with an escrow, like you've done with Burke's Homes, and have them work with my office to generate the new ordinance and language, or that would be your normal protocol to do? Because you're doing it at their request and not,
Yeah.
I would say yes to that.
is that something that you guys can file?
We need a motion to proceed with that.
No, you don't.
You'll need a motion to approve it,
Right.
but once we see the text amendment, then.
So if they file the application and submit the cash escrow to cover the fees to review, we could then have the proposed amendment ready for your review next month. And with your go-ahead, then submit it through the county for a 30-day review period. And that's 60 days out for then action in, what?
In the
Early
meantime, you
June?
can proceed with the land development.
Proceed with the land development plan, see what's in it.
Yep.
As far as the text amendment, that's gonna allow them up to 50% of the overall structure.
Whatever percentage they.
Whatever percentage,
This board has to come up with.
you have
right?
to,
Yeah,
you should give them an idea of what percentage you're comfortable with.
That's,
I'd be comfortable with 50% of the overall completed structure, to be honest with
The
you.
proposed structure. So you're just looking at the new
Yes,
stuff,
the proposed
not the
structure.
old.
they don't even need, they don't need anywhere near 50%.
No, I know, but I'm saying, I think Steve at Sheds has the same situation on his Sheds Unlimited, doesn't he? He has commercial and industrial right down there.
No, his
It's not
property's
building.
all I-2 now.
Yeah, I thought all
Yeah.
that stuff.
Oh, it
was-
is now.
I
thought
mean,
it was-
I-1, it's all
I thought it was
I-1.
C3 along the turnpike. Cause you can only display sheds there.
Actually, his whole property was changed to the I.
It was now.
It was.
Okay.
Yeah. He did have that problem though, you're right,
Yeah,
way
at
back,
one
but
time.
that was changed to, move that whole area into the I zone.
Would it be harder to just rezone his property so the line goes around his property line?
You're gonna,
I'd rather get him in.
Yeah, that'd be spot
You
zoning.
can,
probably.
well, not spot zoning, but you gotta post where it's gonna be a map
Yeah.
change at that point, so the
Okay.
advertising requirements are a little different. Not that you can't meet them, but you just have to.
Yeah, we wanna
Terry
try and
Jones
expedite
is supposed
things.
the text amendment is the easiest process, to
Okay,
be honest with you.
yeah.
So if we just say 25%, that covers, more than covers what they got.
Yeah, I wouldn't wanna go more than 20.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, this
Would
is
that be,
right here.
would that be a fair percentage, 25% over the line?
Of the proposed addition?
Yeah.
Yeah, because you're
Yeah.
less than 25%.
in a couple years, they might want to add a little bit more.
Well,
We can't.
they can't.
Yeah.
Oh,
Uh,
okay, so build up
yeah.
the
There's an
property
issue, we
now?
can't,
There's a creek running back through here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it gets
And now
into the
that-
floodplain and
And that's
everything
the
else.
floodplain right there.
Commercial district, and they can't.
yeah,
So that's it.
so that line right there is what we can't build over.
Got it.
Yeah, you can see the dotted line here for the original proposed driveway,
Yeah,
back to here. So we're not gonna go beyond that line.
okay.
So I would say 25% covers what you're looking at.
Yeah, of the completed finished structure,
Yes,
not of the original, 25% of that.
completed new
Of
finished
the
structure.
proposed structure.
Yeah,
Right.
It could, there could be cases where there's no structure at all and the whole thing's proposed.
okay.
Right, and it's not an addition, so.
So it'd be 25% of 50 feet, is that?
Yes.
Or 50 feet.
Yeah. With no special.
Well, I would say 50 feet, I would leave the 50 feet first.
Okay,
Or
50 feet
25%.
or 25% of the proposed structure.
So that's about 125 feet this way. And then across.
Yeah, but
You're gonna be under, you're gonna get.
Yeah. you're gonna be under the 25%.
Yeah.
That's,
Just by looking at that.
yes.
That's probably at best 15%.
Now that driveway is in use now?
So we have, this is all paved here, and then we have, this is it's for the, just in case fire trucks have to come in, that's the way it was laid out. So that's what this is, it's all kind of gravel, you can drive on it, you can drive 18-wheelers on here, but it's just not paved. So this part will be what we're proposing to pave, because when you turn around for the trucks to come in. But this is all in use right now. All right, all right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, have a great night, everybody. Thank you.
Going well there.
Special exception coming out too, right?
Yeah, so we'll take that up.
Yeah.
I drive by it every day.
Beautiful, yeah, big.
And when they built that building,
They do it.
without rolling.
It's no standard.
We're at, lot 4, Heritage Drive.
Okay, Mr. Stolzfus?
I haven't been here before, so I was imagining putting this plan out on the table. Sorry about that.
You can borrow this if you need to.
So, I do have a, okay. Written document.
Thank you.
With my fingers.
Thank you.
And out. So, yeah, this is just a sketch plan for lot 4 of Heritage.
Somebody help you hold that?
And I'll leave this with you, so this is just a sketch plan. So your ordinance, suggests that it's wise to bring a sketch plan before you come in with a preliminary plan and, you know, for your sake, this is, we've been engaged with the owner, who, that's still being determined, okay, we've been engaged in doing design for, land development and building for about 15,000 square feet, 3 buildings, 3 segments in the building, connected building. And we engaged Land Corps to do this sketch plan, but they're gonna be the engineers as well. They're the Starbucks site and the Taco Bell site. It's all use by right, what we're looking to do. The certainty that, we're gonna do all the site work and then build the 5,000 square feet, which will be the dentist office. With a second part probably coming almost right behind that. So I expect to have a preliminary plan in front of you in about 2 months. Some things to do before then, but just for your sake, we just wanted to come in early on and
To orient the board, the driveway with the 2 arrows,
Yeah.
that's going into the Taco Bell Starbucks.
If you go left, right?
Yeah, this is down, this would be downhill.
Just
Yeah.
south.
to the back of it.
yeah, if you go in their driveway, it's to the right of that driveway,
Yeah.
and it actually starts going up the slope and,
And you have a dentist office, and you're not sure what the other 2 buildings will be resided by, what type of business?
not currently. Probably the dentist office will be the center. We're looking to, I'll end up planning to put all the impervious surface and the infiltration and everything, up front. And we're, what I've given you in writing there, we're, not certain whether we're actually gonna condo it. Depends on, I'm pretty sure that the first 2 are gonna be the same owner. The third building, we're not sure, whether it would be someone who would want us, want it to be built and lease it, or actually want to own it. If we do that, we'll have to condo it. So that's still in the works, and you'll know that when we come to the preliminary plan. Okay. I'll just let, I have two sets of plans here, I'll just let them with you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alright, the Winco plans for signatures, I assume that they're in the back, so just get those on the way out. Right.
Please,
Right.
that was on the pages, so that should help you.
Okay. Other business, we have the draft zoning amendment ordinance submission for the residential overlay.
We have the applicant here, First Homes, who has submitted the zoning text amendment. My office reviewed that. I spoke briefly with the council before the meeting, and the council is here. I think, just for streamlining the conversation, it makes sense if I just go through section by section what is being proposed. I'll point out where the differences are with your current PRD ordinance, so you see what kind of changes, some significant, some not so significant. Burke's Homes is here to address the motives, the whys, their rationale for needing the ordinance in the way that it has been presented. So I want to speak for them, and hopefully we can get to the end here in an efficient and productive manner. So first, what they're doing here is proposing, well, before I even begin that, is there anything initially that you guys want to add? I don't want to steal your thunder or
No, I think,
speak for you.
Mr. Brown, I think we've covered it. So we'd just like to hear the planning commission's comments on the proposed ordinance.
Okay, all right. And up front, what I usually say, I probably told this group at some point over the years, these zoning text amendments are legislative. So they're unlike the applications that you usually process where you have certain standards. It's a legislative activity for you and ultimately the Board of Supervisors. So you can accept everything that is being proposed. You can reject it. You can seek to modify or compromise on the language that you don't like. But ultimately, it's going to be the Board of Supervisors' discretion whether to enact this legislation in whole or in part. So what they've done here is latched on to the PRD ordinance that already exists, section 628 of your zoning ordinance. And so you can compare section 628 to in its present form with what's being proposed. And so in terms of eligibility, they've added D. So under section 12, eligibility A, B, and C already exist, no changes there. D will allow a PRD in the IOP zoning district for the first time. And then the reference to section 595 is simply a reference to what comes below in section 2, which are the standards that would govern the PRD in the IOP zoning district only. And we'll work out the numbering so that it's consistent and makes sense with your current ordinance numbering system. So don't get too hung up on whether it should be 595 or some other number. We'll get to that. So 595A, the specific intent, which simply states that you're going to grant the PRD use in the IOP district so that residential developments can be developed within that zoning district. If you turn the page, the PRD section would apply only to parcels that consist of 25 acres or more of contiguous land. And so I don't know how many parcels there are that would qualify. Certainly the airport property would qualify. It's important from a legal perspective that that's not the only parcel in the zoning district that would qualify. You want to make it so that this ordinance looks reasonable and other people have the opportunity to take advantage of it. So my understanding after talking to Terry is that there are other parcels within the district that would qualify if they were so inclined as of this date.
Basically, there are a couple over across the street yet. It's probably several parcels together that are the 25 acres, but there is land across there that could be considered large enough for the other 25 acre.
Those are like, I could look at the map, but, those are like across from like, we're near Walmart, like that.
Yeah, down here, just driving around. Yeah.
Yeah, but basically you're saying by doing this, we'd open up more possible residential on that side of the street now, okay?
The answer is yes, but what realistically is happening is, you just saw one of those parcels. Lot 4 is one of those parcels. The
5, 6, and 7.
well, 6, 7, 8 is Iron Mountain.
Yeah.
So realistically, a lot of that land is already in process of other use. So it's doubtful that anybody, unless you get into redevelopment, where, you know, if something would happen and Walmart would just blow up, you know, then that parcel could be redeveloped.
Could this be restricted to just north of Route 23?
That gets a little too restrictive, I think. Then it could be, there could be a possible appeal for spot zoning, because that actually, the airport property is the only one large enough in the IOP on that side.
If Walmart went under and couldn't survive over there, maybe the residential development wouldn't be the worst thing to happen. I don't know.
Okay, so there's that minimum size, that if you wanna revisit, we can. Moving forward, section 595C is the applicable standards. It basically says that the underlying zoning district standards with regard to areas and bulk requirements would apply. That would be your IOP district that already exists, unless a different standard is established by the ordinance that you're holding in your hands now. And we'll go through some of those differences. 595D are the permitted uses for this overlay, and that essentially is all of the residential types of use you could think of. It's the same list that appears in the R4 and the R5 district. So it's not any more or less than what you permit right now as for PRD in R4, R5. That's single family detached, single family semis, 2-family detached, 2-family semi, townhouses, discussion in prior meetings on the, apportionment, how you're going to apportion townhomes versus apartments versus single. Everybody has a different view there. But this would be one of the two areas where you would be able to exercise control over what gets built. And we'll get to the next part here momentarily. 595E is the permitted accessory uses, which is no different than what exists right now in your PRD. There's been no addition or subtraction of those permitted accessories, nor is there any difference in the next section, the uses permitted by special exception. On section 595G, site requirements, you have the 25 acre contiguous 25 acre minimum, which my note here says it is, if you wanna know what the acreage minimum is for the other residential zoning districts, it's 100 in R1, it's 10 in R4, and it's an 8 acre minimum in R5. So at 25 acres, you're sort of right there in the middle of how you treat PRDs and other zoning districts.
Yeah, but the other PRD zonings are residential districts. This is not this commercial district. You know what I'm saying? This first time, except for it looked like in an I district, you were allowed, if it bordered on a R5 or R4, to, also put PRD in the I district. But other than that exception, all the other were residential districts. This would be changing commercial to residential.
The other site requirements are the same, so you can see specifically water sewer is adopting the existing PRD. Open space, again, you're adopting the existing PRD, and so you don't need to check. The existing PRD requires a minimum of 40% gross area to be common open space, with certain restrictions on what constitutes the open space. In R1, you could reduce that to 30% under some circumstances, and so here, they're not proposing any change to that 40% obligation. Under 595H maximum density, this would be the second of those two areas where you would control density. And so what they've proposed is similar but not exact to what already exists in the PRD. You have a 6 dwelling units per acre density, which is the same as your R4 zoning. And so you know R5 is 8 units, and R1 is 2.5 units. And so here you're in at 6. 2 of the total number of units planned, the proportion of each building type shall be limited to the following, and then and that's how you apportion it with the limitations. So for single family detached, Berks has proposed a 50% maximum. I will note that the current ordinance requires 50% minimum. So that would be a material difference from your existing ordinance. Instead of at least 50%, no more than 50%.
So you're saying on the total property, you could put a maximum of 50% single family homes? But currently, the ordinance would be a minimum of 50% of that land in single family homes.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
That's a big difference.
The other percentages, there's no change. Single family has a 25% maximum. 2 family detached is a 10% max. 2 family semi 10%. Townhouse is a 50% max, and apartments 50% max. There's no requirement that any or all of these types are used. You could use some and not the others. And then that's it for density. And I know that has been a major subject of discussion, so it's probably good to pause here, maybe turn the floor over to Berks to explain their approach up to this point in time, in particular with density, and have your discussion at this point. Then we'll pick up and continue with some of the other things as we go forward, guys.
Okay, I'm assuming the question relates to the change from single-family detached 50% minimum to 50% maximum. I'm assuming that's the most prominent question, since the other provisions are identical to what is permitted in the R4 district. So, Gary, we have some reasons from an engineering standpoint and a planning standpoint why we think maximum is a better term than minimum.
Well, if we would look at this sketch that we brought in previously. We had apartments and townhomes and singles. And by having a 50% maximum, it allows for, you know, a little bit better availability of some of the other product, primarily the apartments. The apartments have a, you know, there's a number there that, and Mr. Farina could probably speak that a little better, but there's a magic number there to, as we represented, there would be a clubhouse, and, you know, the amenities are driven by the number of units, and all the other uses, all the other mixes are maximum. This one's the only one that's a minimum, but that was one of the reasons to have a little bit more availability of some of the other residential uses. It also allows the ability to the front section that is going to remain as IOP to maximize that as well. We're close to about 9 acres, 8 to 9 acres in that area.
So that 8 or 9 acres is intended to be used as the commercial portion. So by making single-family detached 50% maximum, it gives us more area on which to work with commercial use.
The one concern I have is there is no limit, or there's no defined mix here. So by saying maximums for everything, what you could do is do 50% townhouses and 50% apartments and no single family.
Exactly. That's what I see
Yeah,
happening,
well-
possibility.
And what I'm getting at is that's the way the language is.
Yeah.
And that's why the minimum on the, whether it's 50% or 40% or whatever for the single family, then it requires at least some single family. If you have, the way it's written now,
We understand.
you could do all apartments and townhouses. So that's my concern.
Why not just propose a lower minimum?
That would be fine. We could do that. We were trying to keep the numbers as close as they were, but if you folks are willing to look at a lower percentage, and again, it was a sketch plan, but that's around 40, like 30, 39, 40 is about where that sketch plan is, if you want to use that for a reference point. But it's a good point, we understand, but there's a certain component to the business structure that want to try and get as many singles as we can and still be able to have the mix of the different products.
You know, I noticed that right away, with the maximum on the single family, there was nothing stopping you from doing 50% townhomes and 50% apartments. And once we pass this overlay, if we pass this, it's a by right use. It might not be this year or next, but down the road, if something happens, construction's delayed, you could change the plans and come in here, it fits this use, it's a by right use. And we can't stop it.
And we apologize, that was never the intent, and we completely understand your point, and it's well taken, and if there's a way to address a minimum.
Would a 40% minimum cover it, or, I mean, is that within your?
Yeah, I think we'd probably make that work. But I understand, Alan, I mean, it's a really good point, and that was not the intent, but I get it that down the road, something could change.
We can agree to 40%.
Well, I think there's also the concern too, like, because it's, you know, an overlay that is encompassing a lot more than just this piece of property, so the, you know, the concern would be that, somebody would wanna come in and do, yeah.
More discussion, or you wanna move on to the next page? I'm not suggesting you can't have discussion when we're done going through it.
Yeah, I don't.
All right, let's continue. So if we turn to the next page, section 595I, minimum lot size per dwelling unit is taken straight from your existing PRD, so there would be no change there. Same with minimum yard dimensions, maximum building coverage and height, all the same. We then go to design standards, and it's predominantly the same. I will note a couple of differences. One is that, I guess if you want to look at subsection C, a comprehensive community landscape design plan shall be submitted by developer for review and approval by the Board of Supervisors. That is in place of what is there now, which is more objective. It requires street trees be planted along all streets with a minimum of 1/4 caliber tree located adjacent to each front yard. So in lieu of that, we've got the idea of a landscape design plan. My concern would be, we need, I think, more standards, objective standards on what would be required of that landscape design plan, which isn't problematic. I mean, we can develop those, and usually developments of this type, they're going to be mutual interest to make it look appealing to buyers and such. And so if you're okay with that, I think between now and maybe the next meeting, we establish some more objective standards. Otherwise, the Board of Supervisors is left with really nothing but their own discretion on what an acceptable landscape design would look like. If you are inclined to require these, at least one tree in front of every yard, this would be the time, I think, to tell us, and maybe Burks can explain why that requirement is something they want to avoid, if it is.
In many municipalities now, we're seeing that they do not want street trees. The residents don't want street trees. And a 4-inch caliper street tree has a pretty high mortality rate. So it's better to go with a smaller tree. But what the advantage is, and your point about having standards is a good point. We can take the plantings and locate them. You know, a landscape architect will go in and kind of tell us where these things can go, but we can clump trees and shrubs in areas that are buffers, as opposed to just strictly running behind the sidewalk. And you know, I'm sure you're gonna want them out of the right of way, because that's where you still do street trees. You want them out of the right of way, and that basically ends up as a tree in a front yard. Because if it's let's say it's a 28-foot cart width, you know, you're 11 feet on either side, and then you're a couple feet behind that. You have to have utilities in there. You know, it might as well incorporate it into a planning of a house. So we would agree to trying to work through some standards, but we would prefer not to be locked into just strictly street trees. There may be some areas where we would want to do street trees, like a one-sided a road that's only single loaded, or maybe a section of road that has no homes on. That might be an area where maybe some trees would work. But a comprehensive plan from a landscape architect, I think, would make for a better community than just trees lined up right down the street.
That's a good point. The supervisors will know that you've had discussions at your supervisors' meetings over street trees causing maintenance problems or issues and challenges, at least on public streets, when the leaves fall and then being in the right of way and such. So maybe you're not offended by that removal, and we can then, the starting place would be to just simply cross-reference the landscape standards that are in existence in the Saldo. But Burke should probably review those standards to make sure that they're okay.
Is the landscape standard in the Saldo, will that cover like screening for this whole development with trees?
It would cover the screening for the parking areas for like the apartment and the townhouses, or
But not like around the whole development, like the proposal they showed us? The trees around the roads from like the existing properties, the commercial properties?
The way the landscape is written, it really is, it's designed for the screenings that are required. Some of those other ones are not required. And so, it does work, but not for everything.
It's actually ordinance 295, which is a zoning ordinance, where you put the landscaping along with lighting a couple years ago. You guys may remember that.
Well, I think it was something with casino too, right?
Well, it was a casino, but it was with the apartments across the street. It
Yeah.
was more about,
Yes.
lighting and visibility,
Yeah.
and et cetera.
As far as, does that cover like screening from like the existing high crop from this development if they put it in? Will they be screened from high crop? No. Cause
Well,
that's,
That's just industrial,
Again,
to
yeah.
residential.
The screens per se are really designed about group parking. In other words, like for the apartments, or
okay.
for a section of townhouses that might have communal parking.
So it's not to screen communities from each other?
No. It's not to say they can't provide that, it's not required.
Okay.
That is, on the other hand, required between commercial/industrial, between residential and those
Correct.
commercial industrial.
Yes, that is a requirement.
Again, if I go back to our sketch plan, we were showing like buffer trees along the existing Willow Glen Road against Morgan Trailer. We were showing them, as they back up to the first few homes is when you go in towards Highcroft. There's what, 2, 4, 6 homes there, but there's none against Highcroft because there's a lot of open space between, our homes and Highcroft. So I'm not sure how effective buffering would be because looks like maybe 300-400 feet between our homes we're proposing and Highcroft, some of which is their open space and some of which is our open space. But again, the flexibility is, it's kind of the discretion. I know in some places, the planning commission has the discretion to give their input onto what the landscaping is.
We move on, let's see, the streets, I'll point out the streets only because since I've been appointed township solicitor in 2017, I've universally heard of concerns, or I could say complaints, about the end result of PRDs from prior history concerning width of streets and parking availability in various parts of the township. And so here's where we get to the section governing streets and parking. And there is no change from your existing ordinance. So Bert's isn't proposing to be treated differently. But the question you may want to have some discussion on tonight is whether the current standards are appropriate based on your prior experience. And so here at subsection D, says streets shall be designed with a minimum 33-foot cartway and a minimum 33-foot right-of-way and a minimum 28-foot cartway. So it's 28-foot wide streets. And then E, a service street. I'll let Terry speak to the difference between streets versus service streets. The service street is an 18-foot wide for two-way traffic, 12-foot wide for one-way. Here they're proposing two-way all the way around.
Service streets really are, they're connectors. In other words, it's not meant to be, you don't put houses on a service street.
Okay, no houses on a service street.
There's no parking, there's no space for parking on that street, on a service street. It really is strictly, it's meant to be like an access drive,
So like that,
to get through someplace, you know, to get from one point to another.
that road that goes behind the commercial piece would be a service street?
Could be.
No?
Well, it depends, I mean,
Yeah, okay, I was just curious.
but
What
that's,
about a road that goes to a cul-de-sac? That's not a service street?
no.
Okay.
There are two areas that would probably qualify in back to the sketch plan that we've shown, Terry. There's a open space area that, it's one way around, and then that's on the eastern side of the property, and then at the western side of the property of the single families, there's another similar area where there's an area of green space in the middle and houses out around the outside. And I believe the way it looks, they're proposed to be a little bit narrower than the cart width of the other street. So that may qualify for that.
The issue is, and really, for the planning commission, that there are problems now in Penwood and in Highcroft with parking. You know, when you get a single family home with teenagers and they have 4 vehicles or 5 vehicles, it's chewing up street parking. And there has to be at least some street parking, where you have the single families. So and depending on the townhouses, how that parking is configured, you may need, I wanna say, communal parking areas for visitors, for whatever, for the overflow of, you know, the teenager who has a car. So it's just something that the width of the street can really come into play there. So it's something to really look at.
You know, Penwood is a narrower street. Penwood is 24 feet.
Yeah,
So we're proposing 28 feet.
and Penwood has parking on one side.
And
What are Highcroft streets?
24,
I
They're
cross
24.
over 24.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, 28 is not very
And
wide.
that 4 feet's not even wide as one car.
No, Highcroft is brutal,
I know
that
that buses make phone calls every day in there, there's stuff they can't.
Oh,
Well-
it's crazy.
well, it's funny you bring up the bus thing, because these streets are proposed and desired to be private streets, HOA owned. The buses aren't supposed to go in there. Not sure I agree with that, but, typically that's the policy of
So there's one,
districts.
you're saying there would be like one bus stop.
There may be one or two bus stops, maybe one in Highcroft and maybe one down where it ties into the traffic light.
Wow.
At 24
But
feet,
there's a problem though, if the school then, no offense, but if the school then next year changes that, because there's a new, director or whatever.
Actually, I'm just
that-
thinking of I'm thinking more of the people that live there. You know, to have their kids walk from pretty far back. Well, okay.
Their
but
parents
then-
drive them and then they stack up along the
Yeah,
street.
yeah, exactly. So that makes it even worse.
In my neighborhood, I mean, it's Highcroft, and there's 4 bus stops.
yeah.
Your
Okay,
public,
that's-
your streets are public though.
Well, right, but I'm saying, I mean, I think it's unrealistic to have a development
Bus
with many
stop.
homes and apartments, and they're gonna walk somewhere. In our neighborhood, the maximum a kid walks is 6 houses. So you're saying, in the middle of my neighborhood is, this kid's gonna walk 3 blocks or something?
I'm just, Jeff brought it up, and I don't agree with the policy, but the transportation directors don't run on private streets. Now, we're proposing to make a connect to Willow Glen, and, you know, our intent was that would be a township street, so the bus definitely would travel on that street, but, what we're proposing is 28-foot wide cart widths, 50-foot right of way, and, parking on one side. I believe that's in, I don't think we changed that. On-street parking shall be restricted to one side of the street. So we're 28, which is 4 feet wider than what you're seeing in Penwood, and what you're seeing in Highcroft. And still only parking on one side of the street.
Yeah, here it says 28-foot cartway, but 33-foot right away.
Yeah, but what's on our plans is we're proposing a 50-foot right away.
I mean, we took that from these
We used
existing
to
ones.
change.
28 feet. This is the existing, something that's 28 feet?
That's the existing.
Well, you can't predict the future, but we can determine what has happened in the past. And 24 feet is definitely
The
the
worst.
worst.
28's not enough either.
Yeah, it's
I think what the board's saying is take a look at it and see if there's something
You could You
Well,
could create two different standards, one for private
Well, the
streets
problem too
versus
is just
public.
even having a street that's so narrow that you can only park on one side of it, I live on the side of the street that you can park on, and a lot of days I don't even get my mail because so many people are parked on my street.
And not only that,
My
you
neighbor's
have,
got 5 cars, my guy across the
See,
street's got
that's
4
the
cars.
problem. These houses should be set back off the road, the single-family dwellings, deep enough that you can get 2 vehicles back to back, so 4 in a driveway minimum, you know what I mean? So we're talking like 50 feet setback for the home, or the garage from the street. That would make it much more user-friendly for the residents of the community.
what I'm envisioning is, for instance, you go through there and there's a landscape company in there with their truck and trailer, trailers wide. You have a roofer company in there, again, truck, trailers wide. Maybe a dump truck delivering something, you have a trash truck in there gathering up trash. You're gonna have all that in your community, you know what I mean? So you're gonna have those bigger vehicles eating up space. And that's usually at rush hour times. I mean, they're getting there at 7 and they're leaving at between 3 and 6. So they're gonna be there during the rush hour times. And now you have traffic trying to get in and out, cars parked, kids walking. I think it becomes a pinch point.
Do you have any complaints from Millstream? Millstream is a 28-foot cart width. And honestly, and I was involved with Penwood, so I can give you the history of why it's 24, but I'm not gonna do that because I don't wanna waste the time. And you guys don't wanna hear it anyways, because it's not working.
Millstream is right down here.
Right below Paul Whiteman's house, Paulie Whiteman's house?
Oh, the
It
little.
goes
The
past.
loop, it's a loop.
There's no cars parked on the side of that.
The houses are set back a little deeper, aren't they?
Yeah, there's no cars parked on Millstream.
They don't park on the street.
There were some parked on the street when I went and measured the street,
Where at?
on the inside circle.
Oh,
Oh,
I'm sorry, in the development.
Yeah, in the development, not on Mill
Okay,
Road.
I understand, I'm sorry. I
So,
thought you
so,
meant
and honestly,
Mill Road.
you can feel the difference. You can really feel the 4-foot difference. So I'll acknowledge that the 24 feels tight. But at the time, 24 also slows, the narrower roads slow down the traffic. There was a part of that when we went through that. That was one of the concerns. And, but we understand, you don't want 24-foot roads. Honestly, and you kind of tell us what it is that you want to see, but I think 28 works, especially looking at if drive through Millstream and see what you think. There's a cost standpoint, obviously, to install, but more importantly, there's a cost down the road for the residents to replace. And on a township street, it's the same way. You're gonna pay more money, obviously, for a 28 foot versus a 24 foot, or a 32 versus, a 28. So there's a balancing part there, so that's my points on the street.
So Millstream is 28 feet wide.
Yes.
We should over,
Yeah.
I just for reference sake.
And we understand the concerns and look for the input, but, they are setback, they're setback a little bit more than what you're seeing in Highcroft. Highcroft setbacks, I'm gonna say, I think they're 15 feet from the right of way.
25.
25 from the curb.
From the curb.
Yeah, and they're 24-foot widths, so you're talking 12 feet from the back of the sidewalk, 13 from the face of the sidewalk. So if you're 25, yeah, it's right around 15 feet from the right of way. And we're proposing 20. And plus the right of way, so we'd be looking more like, we need 12, 32 feet from the street. From the face of curb to the furthest most, to the setback, to the furthest front we could put a garage.
The other thing we see a lot now, a lot of people are driving big SUVs, pickup trucks more often than not. almost every family owns a pickup truck. So with that 20 feet, that's what we're seeing, with that 15 feet, they can't park in their driveway, so they park on the street. Now you have a bigger vehicle, bigger mirrors, that's what I'm thinking about.
Or
That's
they
what
park
becomes
on their driveway and they're so close to the road.
Well, they
the plow
block the
truck goes
sidewalks
by,
and
they
now the
damage
kids
the
walk.
truck.
Yeah,
Right.
Well, are you gonna take a look at Mill Stream and
absolutely.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You're looking at sidewalks just on one side?
I thought I heard in an earlier meeting, yeah, that's what we'd like to do, but I thought I heard in an earlier meeting that, the desire was to be on both sides. We'd prefer on one side, and that would be the side where the parking is, which is similar to Penwood, which I believe, I'm not sure what's in Mill Street. I know that's what's in High Cross as well. You have the sidewalk on one side, parking's on the same side. So we'd prefer to do that, Roger. But thought we heard something different earlier.
I don't remember, I'm not gonna say that I remember that, I don't, but I do know that a lot of developments, not just here in Morgantown, but everywhere, have a sidewalk on one side.
We're seeing,
It's a wider sidewalk.
we're
but it's
seeing
on
sidewalk on
side.
one side, 5 foot wide.
Yes.
That's something we're seeing in other communities.
That's where I'm inclined to go, where, that's my preference, just one side. really.
One side, 5 foot wide.
Yeah.
It's a saldo, but what they've done in the past is they have a deferment agreement, I believe is what you've done. That if the township at some point wants the sidewalk required to be put in, the residents would have to put the sidewalk in.
Yeah, so that referral would need to be on the drawing.
Correct.
yeah, I don't think it's part of the zoning issue though, I think it's a saldo issue, so.
Okay. You wanna move on, you, address parking, I guess. Page, subsection F is the one parking space for every 2 residential units when no on-street parking is provided. So if there is, then that would not be applicable here, I guess, because there's gonna be parking on at least one side.
Mr. Brown, we do have some, we talked about parking for townhomes. There are some additional parking spaces, with the townhomes that are, on either side of the buildings that are at the intersection. Probably, maybe 30, maybe 20 to 30 spaces. I can't see all the lines, but
Should we address parking at townhomes separately from, should we distinguish, in other words, between any off-street parking in the single-family or single-family area versus the apartment area, separate standards? Terry, what do you think about that?
Yeah, it would be a good idea. I mean, I don't know that we need to do anything as far as, like, the 1 for 2 in the PRD section, that's for the single family. Just, I think it'd be a good idea to establish something as far as setting up how many additional, and I can't tell you what that should be. I mean, you're gonna have to look at, how many units, I think, for example, if you have a group of like 12 townhomes, how many of those, I mean, you've got 2 for each of those, but how many of those are gonna need more spaces? I mean, I don't know what the magic number is, but we definitely need something.
we'll look at the product. And then we can determine the number of extra that's.
Well, we'll have 2 car garages though too. So there's 2 spaces in each unit, that.
That's what I was talking about.
Right.
And we'll also have residential parking too.
And on townhomes, there's no on-street parking.
Right.
There's just no place to park.
Right.
It's mostly driveway. We can refine that number.
Okay. Then under the townhome standards, there's a couple of little changes, I don't know if it's nitpicking or not, but I just wanna let you know where they are. So under B for townhomes, says within any continuous group of townhouses, there shall be at least 2 different architectural plans having substantially different designs, building materials, and exterior elevations. In your current PRD, there's an additional requirement. It says in addition, no more than 3 continuous townhouses shall have the same front setback, and the variation in front setback shall be at least 4 feet. That's been omitted from the Burke's proposal. I don't know why, I don't know if it's significant or not, I just point that out. Is there,
Need 2-foot offsets instead of 4 for each 2 units, right?
We propose no offset, in our ordinance, proposed ordinance. There are maintenance issues, right, with 4-foot offset?
Yeah, initially the thought was is because of different fascia product, stone, vertical siding versus horizontal siding, we could do it straight across, but we understand that in your original ordinance, it was 4 feet. We would go to 2 feet, we see that a lot. The problem with 4 feet is, think about a sheet of plywood, that's the width of the offset, and when there's, and this is a pretty flat site, but there's still gonna be some grade differential, and it creates, if you have one unit higher than the other, and it's forward, it happens to be the building that's forward, it ends up with a little bit of, it creates the possibility of a water problem, where it can get some water trapped. Terry, you probably seen it. So at 2 feet, it's not as pronounced, so, what we're saying is that we would change that to match your ordinance, with the exception of, instead of 4 feet, it would just say 2 feet. So every 3, there would have to be a shift front to back of 2 feet.
So it's
Yeah,
just
right.
like 2 feet?
that's what you want? Any strong opinions, either way, probably not. Then if you go down a little bit further here to the minimum horizontal distance between the groups of townhouses, you see 1, 2, and 3. 1 and 2 is exactly the same as what's in the current PRD ordinance. Number 3's been changed, but I think it's a slight change. Right now, your current standard reads that for the minimum distance between group homes for sidewalls facing sidewalls, it would be equal to the height of the building, or the highest building. The standard proposed by Burke's is that there would be 30 feet distance between sidewall and sidewall.
The maximum height is 35 feet,
So
so it's not a major difference.
Anybody strong feelings about that? Okay. And then under 3 apartments, everything here is the same as in your existing PRD ordinance, with the exception of B, maximum length of an apartment building. Right now, the maximum length is 160 feet. Burke's is proposing a longer home with a max of 250 feet. Again, for planning or design purposes, I don't know what the difference is, if anything.
Fewer buildings.
I think the simple answer is,
Fewer buildings.
it reduces 2 buildings, correct? So instead of 6 proposed, it would be 4 proposed. And that's the whole reason behind it, to try and have less apartment buildings, maybe line them up a little bit different, and different configuration.
Anybody strongly care or opposed to that? And then, turning to the last section, 590, everything else in that section's been the same, if I've not pointed it out, no difference. The last section, 595M, ownership and management, this incorporates exactly what is in the PRD section, PRD ordinance right now, no change. And essentially that contemplates that if there's gonna be a management company or there's gonna be an HOA maintaining all the common open space, I don't think there's a surprise there or desire to create something new or different. And so that is the proposal. So again, you guys can, if you have any further discussion, I think we've got direction on areas that we can focus on and work out areas that you are in agreement with right now, and areas that you want to further consider.
There's nothing in here that requires an HOA for the entire development, right?
Well, under the ownership and management section there at the end, that would be one of the options available to the developers to create an HOA, probably what they would intend to do.
There may be two. There may be one for the apartments and then one for, the single families and townhomes.
I'm asking, is it a requirement?
Is a requirement in that they're required to provide for the maintenance of the common areas. They can't avoid that, it's not gonna fall onto the townships.
For the apartments and the single family, all the streets?
Correct,
sidewalks?
all common
Yeah.
area would be covered under
It is
under an
required.
HOA declaration.
So we would get a copy of the declaration, I'll review it, to make sure that it is sufficient and protects the township's interests. And then that gets recorded before anybody starts buying any lots, and it'll run with the land. Now, what's public versus what's private is always left to the township's discretion. It sounds like First is willing to assume private ownership and control of the streets. There's some open space requirements that presumably will include some recreational facilities, either active or passive, that would need to be maintained. Stormwater basins and facilities. So, and it doesn't sound like there's a difference in view here, that all of that would be the responsibility of the private HOA. It would not be something the township now has to incur and worry about additional maintenance costs coming out of the general fund to do that.
My biggest concern is we're taking currently zoned commercial property and creating an overlay for residential, and we've never allowed for that before. And, the fact that we're only gonna have 40% possibly, or probably, single-family units, I don't think most people were too happy with the last proposal that, you know, only had how many apartments versus single families, I don't know.
What was the unit breakdown again?
144 apartments, 42 townhomes, 110 single families.
But that can be changed at any time once this is adopted, right, Terry?
Well, okay, that ratio is not in the ordinance.
Yeah.
Okay, that's, the only thing that we talked about tonight was making, the only minimum is a certain amount of single family. So, really, the rest of it, that mix,
It could be all apartments.
well,
No,
well, I mean, that's,
It could,
that's up to whatever the actual proposal is. The ordinance, it wouldn't have to have any townhomes, it could be just single family and apartments. So
Yes.
it really is, there's nothing other than that 40% minimum or whatever that establishes a certain number of a given type. That's the only thing that establishes any kind of minimum.
Yep.
The rest are all whatever works best, really economically, for whatever the development is.
And from what we've seen here, like in Penwood, when that was originally started, a bunch of the homeowners bought in there thinking they were gonna have a homeowners association, and they didn't. And years later, they come to this board all the time complaining about neighbors' lawn not being mowed and stuff.
Right.
And we don't have ordinances to govern things like that. And they complain that they never had the HOA they were promised. But the other thing is, the development behind, Elmore, that took decades to complete. And the first people that bought there were promised a certain type of home with a 2-car garage, and over the years, they downsized, like, and maybe no garage, and now there's no parking for everyone, and they fight over who parks where in that development, and, you know, that's the problem. Once you change to, like, once you, accept this or, you know, adopt this overlay, they can down the road change the initial plan. If the market changes or whatever, and it might be something that is less desirable to the community than what the original proposal was, you know what I mean?
Can I make a couple comments? First of all, it can't be all apartments because there's a maximum, 50%, it's a maximum of 50% of the total units. So
Okay.
we
So it could be-
couldn't do all apartments on this to address that
You
concern.
do, yep, okay.
As far as Penwood goes, there were 11 buyers in there that when they were sold, they were told it was going to be a homeowners association. Then we had discussions with the township. The township, they wanted some land for a maintenance building, and they were willing to take the open space in kind of trade-off for that and the park area, and all 11 folks, I believe it's 11, signed off on agreeing to not be part of a homeowners association, and honestly, Alan, that's more desirable than folks living in a homeowners association. And I understand your regulations, and that's a good point. But that's what went on at Penwood, so everybody, in order for that HOA to go away, in the initial, and it was before anybody closed on a home, they all had agreements of sale. They had to, 100% of them had to sign off in agreement to allow that to happen. So if somebody's telling you that there was something changed that they weren't aware of, that's absolutely not true. So that's how that happened.
And I was one of those original 11 people, so.
You were.
Yeah.
And doesn't that accurately?
Yeah,
depict
and I
what
was one of the
went
ones that didn't want to sign, but I did.
on? Well, we didn't twist your arm.
Yeah, I just didn't like it, but I did it, because I knew it was for the betterment.
Okay, so if you do 40% minimum single family, you could do 50% apartments, you could do 10% townhomes. So, that's still a lot more apartments than you're currently proposing.
No, no.
It's the same
no.
number.
It's
It is?
Is it 50%? It's not 50% apartments now.
just slightly under 50%. 144 total units is 296. So it'd be 288 would be 50%. So we're slightly under 50%.
Oh, I thought it went by land area.
Yeah, it's not by land area. it's
It
by
doesn't go by
unit.
land area?
No, it's number of units.
By unit.
So if you had 50% townhomes and 50% apartments, the land area, the actual single family homes would be much bigger than the.
Well, single families take up a little bit more area than a townhome as well.
Right.
So it's probably, not quite 2 to 1. It's close.
And you have 40% of the area being covered open space.
Right. Oh, right, yes, okay, right. Yes, so right there, if you have.
Just for your concern that those single families would go away, and Laverne, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a business component to this from a marketability that, this needs to have single families for the product or for the development to work. Is that a correct statement?
Yeah, well, having 3 types of product, we can move through it faster too, which is, being able to sell a lot more units per year if we have 3 different products than if we had just one. And
Right. Well, the other thing, I mean, if it's
people
a
don't
minimum
like to
of
live
40%.
there. There's construction going on for 10 years, and it's just, the faster we can move through it, the happier everybody is.
If it's minimum 40% single family, and then there's 40% open space. I mean, that's like a huge amount of space, right?
Yeah, obviously the open space is based on acreage.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
So this will probably add, what, over 1,000 residents to the community?
There's 2.5, what did you say, 2.5 people per unit, is that what you based it on?
No, the apartments are gonna bring that average down. Tony, I don't know what the average occupancy is to apartment, but.
Well, it depends obviously on the bedrooms, and, we have very few, I think, or performance says 10% are 3 bedrooms, and they're mostly 2 and 1 bedrooms. So obviously, people with, they're not as rentable, the 3-bedroom apartments aren't as rentable as the 2 and the 1s actually.
If we were the threshold where we need to be MS4 compliant, what will that cost township
That's not how that works.
for, comply?
Well, okay,
That's based on the number of people and amount of runoff, basically. Collected waters.
the initial programming, startup and everything else, you're looking at,
$500,000?
no, not quite that. I mean, okay, I can tell you that Exeter Township, when they figured out all their costs for the MS4 program, for the first 2 years, it was a little over 300,000
Total combined.
total for the 2 years. Okay, now that's not just, it's the engineering, it was the time that the township personnel spent locating all the outfalls, and then maintaining them, documenting them. They actually did the calc and figured out what
How
they
long did
spent.
they do it?
Huh?
How recent did they do it?
Well, they started 4 years ago. Now they're in a maintenance program where it's probably, if I remember their budget, it was like 60,000 a year.
Okay, not 100?
No, not, at this point, they've gotten everything fixed, that, I shouldn't say everything, there are still some problems, but, they've gotten the majority of their stuff to a point where all they have to do is go in and make sure it's clean and, that there's no debris or anything in it, and they can do that fairly quickly.
But they probably had to hire a road crew employee for that, right?
I don't know that they added any extra personnel. I know that that was what they expended in hours.
Okay.
Yeah,
So they
so-
had capacity, we're like tight.
I was gonna, yeah, their road crew is, gonna say a 10-person crew,
Yeah, we got what, 3?
so.
But Terry, the difference is, Exeter is going in to facilities that they took in the past. Whereas a community like this that's being built under the current standards, it's the HOA's responsibility, because they will sign, an operation and maintenance agreement with DEP, that although the township has the overall responsibility, whenever this township, and if this township someday will, no matter what, will become an MS4 township. But the HOA is responsible for all those basins and all those outfalls, not the township. That's part of the DEP. So those costs are gonna have to be absorbed by the residents in that development, or any development from now on, that's designed under the current standards. Am I correct?
That is
Yeah.
correct.
So the cost from a stormwater standpoint to the township is not gonna be a significant cost. And we're familiar with Exeter. We've done a lot of work in Exeter.
Not for your new development, for all the other developments that need to be brought up to the standard, that would be an issue.
But Terry, I don't think that a new development necessarily has anything to do with bumping a township into an MS4. It's based on the existing issues.
Well, actually, it goes by census too. And so whenever the new census comes out, if the township goes above whatever DEP sets that threshold at, cause that's influx too. I mean, I get what that's, right now it's a moving target.
We just did a census, so we're good for 9 years.
Those numbers aren't out yet, that's the problem. So I don't know if the township is gonna be required to do it in this next cycle, but I am sure that the following cycle, it'll be kicking in.
Definitely adding that many more residents puts it that much more likely. But,
It'll probably happen either way.
Is there any research that we could do to find out where that puts us with the MS4? With these, so we have these homes over here, we have the Morgantown apartments, we have that development, where does that put us in the standing?
Yeah, I think we can take a look at that.
yeah, the other concern is you estimate like 100,000 in township taxes from the development. If we gotta hire 2 more police officers, that's like 300,000 just for 2 officers to cover that additional. Now, they aren't gonna be exclusively there, but it'll require additional officers.
That's just property tax income. I don't know what EIT, earned income tax, I don't know what impact that has. I'm not smart enough to do that calculation, so, there's gonna be some additional,
Revenue, there'll be additional revenue.
yeah.
I believe you said before possibly at an educated guess 40,000, so it could take us somewhere between 120, 140,000, income to the township after it's all over. But I believe you said that was just a guess.
No, Jeff, it was a little bit more scientific than that. I think I still have that with me.
Well, I didn't want to quote you and make you look bad.
I thought it was around 100,000 that the residential.
Oh, the residential was 100,000,
And
and you added the business in there.
Yeah, that was
It
the
said it had a
estimate.
potential of another,
Yeah, you're right.
I think it was 20 to 40 or something like that, you'd
Yeah,
say.
it depends on obviously what comes in.
Well, you don't know what business is gonna be there and how many employees or what they're gonna do there, so that's a guess at best.
Oh, here we go. Yeah, you're pretty close. What you're saying is about where it was, like 100 plus whatever the business would bring. Not counting, that's strictly just tax, that's just property tax.
Because that is one thing that I did think about, and all that talk about parking on street, no parking on the street, and that requires somebody to monitor that. Which means you're gonna, and that, I'm not saying that that's gonna be 8 hours a day, 7 days a week, that's not what I mean, but it does require monitoring and attention.
In some of our townships we work in, especially some of them in the State College area, if they're private streets, the police won't go in and enforce parking. That's put on the HOA.
Okay?
And the police are still gonna be called when the resident goes to the HOA and they're fighting over where's my car? Oh, it's at Schaefer's, whatever, they towed it away, we called, and there's gonna be a dispute, you know what I mean?
Well, I think that depends on the quality of your management company, honestly.
There is gonna be, just to reiterate, there is gonna be somebody, a maintenance person / clubhouse person, whatever you wanna call them, on site 24/7, is that correct?
Yes.
So there will be somebody there to monitor those types of situations.
Just the department.
I do Heather Way, and believe it or not, them people are a pain in the ass. If they're 2 inches over their driveway, they're calling me, they're texting me.
Well, that's what, we get those phone calls too, we know that, so
On
that's
a
what we're
holiday,
thinking about.
I don't wanna tow somebody's car, I knock on their door, I ask them, hey, somebody's bitching, could you back your car up 2 inches? And I go, I'm not gonna tow somebody's car because of that, but they bitch.
Well, and we get those phone calls as well.
Well, the police don't go in there, Not for parking issues. They call me. And it's a pain in the ass.
Well, the reality is, we're here to prevent problems for the township and the residents.
Yes.
I think if
you
there's.
stop one problem, you've created 2 more.
I think if there's 4 bedrooms, there should be 4 parking spots
Yes, that
in their
was-
driveway.
Yep,
If that doesn't happen, I wouldn't let them build.
I would think if there's even 3 bedrooms, there should be.
'Cause that's what happened over
4
there.
parking spots.
Well, at Valley Ponds in the last 2 developments, if I'm not mistaken, that's exactly what Alan was bringing up about Valley Ponds was that it originally, when the proposal came through, there was 2-car garage with 2 parking spots in the driveway. And now we're at a spot where there's a 1-car garage and 1 spot in the driveway and there's 3 cars in the street.
Heather Way, they get 1 car in their driveway, and they build a small garage, you can't even get an SUV in it.
Right,
So where do you park?
in the street.
There's no, they ain't allowed to park in the street. They got a little
So they did
side parking
overflow.
lot, and they were complaining about that, people using that. That was for guests.
So originally there was supposed to be, and please don't quote me on this number, cause this number could be wrong. There was supposed to be 8 overflow parking spots based on what that building was proposed at originally. Well, now there's double the number of vehicles, and they wanted to build overflow parking to the same standard as original. So now, the residents can't even park in their own development where they bought a home, /rent lease, whatever it
You
is.
know, they do sign the papers and they do buy the home knowing that, but they do it, and I don't know why.
They don't think about
Well,
that,
they
they're
don't-
just, they
they
see
don't
the
really-
It makes
beautiful home they
no,
want.
it makes no sense. You signed the papers, you bought it, now you're complaining about it.
But now they're in here, and that's where we come in, now they're in here, and they're raising Cain, and there's nothing we can't fix what has already happened. And that's exactly what Alan was stating, you can't fix what has already happened, that has already happened. So, I think that's where Alan's concerns come from, if I'm correct.
We'll be dealing with it for the
And,
rest of
and
our lives.
I can attest to that as well, it's happened in this room many times. So that's where that concern, the parking concern comes from.
Where do we go from here? We submitted the proposed ordinance, as requested and as we asked to do. So we presented it with the help of Mr. Brown. At this point, what's the next step?
I would suggest that maybe we get a revised ordinance or ordinance with comments in writing back to them, that I can maybe circulate to all of you in the coming days to make sure everybody's on the same page, so that they get some concrete feedback that's based on the discussion tonight, so there wouldn't be anything new or anything that's of a surprise, and then they can consider it, accept it, try to convince you to back off of whatever direction you wanna go in. We can have those further conversations, so the next step, maybe something from me back to them.
I would say that's accurate.
Is that okay?
Yeah, I think we need to all take this, see what questions we have, and when we get together as a board, have Eric put together questions we might have or concerns.
And what I'm sending them may not have all the answers with regard to parking, but maybe just suggestions or things for them to consider, that hopefully will meet your needs as well as their needs.
I have one thing here about the 30-foot between townhouses. I'm thinking that went back to the fire marshal coming up with spacing.
There's a dimension in the, first of all, there's one in the building code, but that's actually less than the 30 feet.
Oh, okay.
The 30 feet is actually something that the fire marshal recommended. And there again, it has to do with the height of the building.
Right.
If something would happen to collapse or whatever, it's the fall zone.
I mean, I don't have a problem with the 30-foot, but I didn't know if that was something that can be
Should we have a
changed.
caveat that it's subject to fire marshal?
Yeah, well, that's not the worst idea. The fire marshal will be providing comments during the land development process, so.
My biggest concern is we're changing zoning from commercial to residential, and it doesn't benefit the community at all. You know, the commercial's like the engine of our economy in our township, they pay our taxes.
Now, at the same time, I'm kinda watching those
lots across from Walmart, they're finally starting to get built on. So
Yeah,
it's like,
dentist office
okay.
is desirable, you know. Testing facility for, Kid Joy, that's desirable. Only 3 employees, they said, would be at that big facility.
Yeah.
That's only 3 cars.
I get Alan's view and appreciate it, and I don't know if the other 4 share that view or not. It's always my recommendation to planning commissions or boards to be candid with the developers that come in front of you. So if Alan's sentiment is shared, and I interpret it to mean that Alan doesn't want any residential, but if that's shared by 4 of you, I would encourage you to tell the developer now, before he continues to invest in this idea and this project. There's nothing unlawful about you voicing a candid position to the developer. Most often they appreciate it as to beat around the bush. So again, I don't know if Alan's sentiment is shared by everybody or not.
I do as well, just, I mean, going back to the things I said before, there's only so many things I can limit in here as far as like traffic. I'm just kind of looking big picture, like, you know, we have, like I said, we have the projects that are already in motion, we have townhomes, we have other apartments that are gonna start. And I think about the road problems that we have now, and I think, boy, I mean, residential would add to that a lot. Whereas, you know, some of the projects we've seen just come up are, they're business projects, which, are a little bit more financially digestible for us, and so far, they've been low traffic ones too, and it's, I just think, you know, from a standpoint of that road, there's only one area like that in town that has, or not as many areas like that left in town that has that road frontage, and is this the best use for it?
Well, there's still gonna be road frontage, like commercial road frontage there, and they're.
A portion of it.
Yeah. Still gonna be some.
I think we kind of gave you an idea at a previous meeting, I think it was planning, maybe it was supervisors, of the actual available commercial area that's currently ready to go in your township with streets, and improvements already in. If you look at what's remaining in, the Walmart area, if you look at, what CF has, the building you saw tonight, you go over into Hankins Business Park, and then you just go down the road a little bit in New Morgan. I mean, that's where you're gonna see, if there's any industrial growth, that's where it's gonna be. And I understand your concern about traffic, and we aren't at the point to do a traffic study to determine what the impact is, but it's really good to see the commercial. But lived here a long time, and I hear the same complaints about, when are we gonna get this kind of restaurant, or when are we gonna get this? And we go back to, there has to be a balance between residential and commercial. And if you would look at some of the more recent comments, probably one's going on right now at Robinson, the county planning commission is, and Terry, maybe in some of your other townships, they're recommending more residential, because that's what the need is. If you talk to some of the businesses that are as far up as the I-78 corridor, they're going to Lebanon and Lancaster, and these are some executives, good paying jobs, or going to the Allentown area, because there's nothing, you know, south, for residential. I mean, the communities that we have that are in Berks County, we don't have that, we're getting ready to start one in Exeter Township, and there's pretty good demand for residential, and you guys have to weigh the balance of looking at how much commercial and industrial you have versus what little residential you have left. I mean, you have some little pieces here and there, but this is a property that is contiguous to residential, and sure, that's what we do, so we believe it to be good use of the property. But I think if you if you would talk to an outside planner or your inside planner, you know, maybe you're gonna hear the same, gonna hear the same comment that, you know, you gotta have the rooftops to bring some of the things that you otherwise wouldn't get without the houses.
Yeah, and I'm not convinced that the amount of rooftops that you put in there would put us over the hump to get like a Red Robin or whatever it is that folks want. I mean, I think that there's opportunity around here. I think if the area grew, like New Morgan, there's a whole bunch of undeveloped land in that
500
area.
acres.
Once you start filling in around it, then yes, those larger places will come here, but, and if they do, if I've already spent that on residential, I have no more business land to develop.
We haven't had to raise the taxes in this township for like 20 years, and that's because of smart growth, mostly commercial. We don't have a lot of residential land in this township since New Morgan separated years ago. But, residential puts more burden on the township to provide services like road crew and all that, where commercial more than pays for itself when it develops land. And that piece of land is a very desirable piece of land. It's perfect for any type of purpose. It's flat, and, you know, the only problem is access, you know. To get to it from the major arteries like 176 and the Turnpike is a problem with the volume of people.
So how does the rest of the planning commission feel?
I don't have a problem with residential on that piece of property. I think having the, you know, commercial stuff up front and the residential stuff in the back, to me makes sense. I mean, I live backed up to that field, and when I look out there, it's hard, you know, I mean, I guess if you built a huge, like strip mall, or, you know, like a big box store there, but that's a lot of, you know, acreage to take up. But, I mean, so I think having the, you know, residential stuff in the back and the commercial stuff up front makes sense to me. I mean, the traffic thing, I mean, there's gonna be traffic, I guess, no matter what anybody does with that. If you, you know, put a successful, you know, grocery store, restaurants, or there's gonna be traffic. I mean, that's, traffic to me is something that you deal with, it's a byproduct of development. It's not something you don't avoid developing things to avoid having more traffic. You just handle the traffic. So I don't have a problem with it.
How would a residential development benefit current residents? Yes, it would benefit people that wanna move here by having the opportunity, but current residents, it really wouldn't benefit, I don't see anyway much. The possibility of a Giant or a Texas Roadhouse coming here, most people would rather drive, I think, 20 minutes or whatever than endure all the traffic to have a local convenient restaurant and grocery store.
How do
I
the
can't
other
speak
two
for
planning
everyone.
commission members feel?
Yeah.
Gary hit it on it for me, you know, get that rooftops here. I think the other supporting businesses will, you know, they're gonna pop up also.
You wouldn't have a Walmart or a Lowe's if you didn't have a Penwood or a
Yeah.
Mountain View. They wouldn't be here. I talked to the developer of, Steve Wilson, and he wanted to know exactly how many units we were gonna build, because it was marginal at best to bring that in. So, you know, to Roger's point, I mean, it's a valid point, whether you wanna agree with us or not. The rooftops do bring some additional retail businesses.
But we
Mr.
didn't
Vickers,
have.
how do you feel?
I am, I'm torn, to be honest. I'm not opposed, but I have concerns, and one of them is traffic. That's an obvious concern. It's obvious. Well, any use is gonna bring more traffic. It is.
Right,
We're not bringing tractor trailers though.
right.
That's
That is correct.
what some other, light manufacturing or something like that might bring.
And I think about that, that's part of why I'm torn, you know what I mean? I think about what it is and what it, you know, what it could be.
I mean, I think too, business, like if you had businesses in there like, you know, restaurants that were open late or, you know, like any, you know, like they're gonna create more traffic for more time than a residential neighborhood does.
I know what Berks County says, Berks County says that Berks County lacks rooftops. That's a fact, that's what they tell any municipality, that Berks County lacks rooftops. Carnarvon Township is not necessarily part of that lacking, it's actually Robinson, Union, you know what I mean, or surrounding areas that are lacking the rooftops. Nonetheless, we're lacking rooftops, doesn't matter where.
We have two of your board members that are opposed to any residential development, two that, I won't say in favor, but are willing to look at. Mr. Brown can't move forward until he has clear direction from the planning commission.
Would it be okay to allow public comment?
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah, is it
so,
okay? Go on. Yeah.
someone would have to unmute, let's see.
Please unmute, or you unmute.
Anyone wanna speak, public comment, you can unmute.
Okay, here.
Does anyone in the audience have anything to say while that's
I have
happening?
something to say. Anybody else?
I'd sooner see rooftops in there than a warehouse that's in there for a couple of years, shuts down, now you got an abandoned building.
I mean, you see like it's Sonic,
Most likely
Yeah,
a
you got
warehouse not
Sonic.
gonna buy that property though.
Domino's.
Well,
you know,
what did one buy it?
That was not an allowed use, but that was the distribution center, it wasn't a warehouse.
Yeah, but the development people behind there, they complained about it, they did not want a warehouse in there at all.
That was a distribution center, it's totally different than warehouse.
You're correct, that was not allowed because of ordinance 289. That was a text amendment to keep that type of use in there. Originally, I believe it was a use in IOP.
No.
It was
See,
very
yeah.
ambiguous language that
Yeah.
they tightened up to prevent abuse of the ambiguous language.
Distribution and trucking.
In C3.
I
Yeah,
mean,
not in the IOP.
yeah, I mean, my feeling is that the, you know, the common consensus that I've heard everybody out there is they want, you know, restaurants, a grocery store. I mean, this may not be like the end all, we will have other development, we have a casino coming in the year that's gonna bring more interest to the area. Those people are gonna need places to live, this area's gonna develop. We really don't, we have so many places that are open that are gonna be commercial between us and Carnarvon and Lancaster. So I don't really think that is the best fit on that property to have more commercial. You know, for me, if I lived in Highcroft, and I do not, I live in Penwood, I wouldn't want a warehouse in that property right next to mine.
It's not gonna be a warehouse, but.
Yeah, well, you just said the IUP was, it could be a warehouse. A distributor was what was opted and that didn't fit the zoning. You said a warehouse.
Yes, a warehouse would fit.
Yes,
For
so it
housing
could
the-
be a warehouse.
For housing their own goods, okay? No one's gonna spend a premium for a piece of ground to put a warehouse on to store their own goods, but.
Well, you said warehouse, so we're going with what you said. So, and going to the cost benefit of, okay, that piece of property, because of the interest, it has gone up in value tremendously with everything else going on in this area right now. So who else is gonna move there that, wanna spend that much money to basically not be a distribution center, to be totally honest? I mean, just cost benefit wise, I mean, you're gonna spend premium dollar for that property. So why would, you know, you not let a residential in there with some commercial in the front? Because really, nothing else is gonna go there that we'll want. And we have to think about the future. I mean, we're already getting more and more interest in the last year on projects. I'd rather see something that's gonna benefit us with rooftops so that we can get a few things that we want in our community. So I just think it's a good fit. And like I said, I was in the first houses in Penwood. You know, I mean, what Gary said about, you know, the roads could be a little wider, but, you know, we learn as things go by, and I think you guys are, a couple little changes you're putting in there would be good for a future residential development, but I think that's the best use for that property. I could just see it on that property, and it just seems to fit. Especially if you have a $450,000 house, you don't want even a potential to have a warehouse next to you. I just don't think that's something that we would want.
I think the other thing that everybody needs to take into consideration too is that you know, there is serious intention to do something with the airport property soon.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's not this, it's gonna be something else.
Yeah, it could be something much better.
It could be something much worse.
It could be. But I'm telling you that residential will cost the current taxpayers more money. Commercial will save them taxes down the road.
But there's no, right,
Down the road.
And do you have a crystal
but
ball?
there's not another, there's not somebody else
It
here.
historically worked.
We're not choosing between two
Historically, it
different
doesn't mean now.
developers.
Can I make a comment?
Yes.
Somebody?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm online. I definitely agree that we need some more commercial properties, specifically restaurants in this area. I think that would definitely bring more value to the houses. I live up on Hunter's Hill, just for reference. Traffic is definitely a concern from people that I've spoken to, and having an HOA down there, I really don't know how that's going to affect, especially with a bus stop. That just sounds ridiculous, having so many kids go so far for those bus stops. Are we gonna put bus stops in for them on the public roads? Is that gonna be costing for the citizens here? And apartments, we talk about traffic with just single family homes. The apartments are gonna bring 4 or 5 people, and what's the height? What are the height restrictions for that building? Because that definitely will be a concern for me, because I live all the way up on the hill and I can see all the way out. If there's gonna be an apartment complex obstructing the view, it's definitely a concern. I'd rather have single family homes that I can look over. And third, what kind of tax increase, if we do have to hire cops to, or police officers to patrol that area, what burden is that gonna put on the taxes for the individuals here? I do agree with the man in the red hat and black hat that commercial does bring more money to the area. However, I don't think that's the intent of the citizens up here at all. We'd rather see residential families down there. Thank you.
You need the name for the minutes.
I have it. He's been emailing me.
One thing I'd like to say, what is the height of the apartment?
3-story apartment.
Is it, okay, so right now the ordinance,
It's 75
okay,
feet.
75-foot height restriction, so they're only talking, I mean, what's a 3-story?
35 feet.
Yeah, 40 feet tops, I mean,
40.
yeah.
40 feet.
So that's 35 feet under the allowed maximum that somebody could, you know.
We just need some direction.
Yeah.
Yeah, my concern definitely is more people in that area. You're gonna have a density of how many people per, square yard, or however you measure it. And the wear and tear on the roads in and out of that development. They're already poorly maintained. The chips up here are horrible. Kids fall on them all the time, get hurt. I ride a motorcycle and almost wiped out just going from a stop. So, many things are thought about up here with the current status, not to mention the development. The roads are gonna be HOA, so they're gonna require that they maintain the roads, I assume. But I don't know, the roads are already in poor repair around here.
So you live on, I believe you live on a township road, and I don't foresee any traffic from the proposed community traveling through the Highcroft area, because unless they're going to visit someone, it doesn't connect anything, so I don't, if your concern is new traffic going through your community, I don't foresee that would be something that's gonna happen.
No, I don't see it coming through the community here unless people take a wrong turn off the turnpike and come through and then want to go to Walmart, and it's a more direct route coming through the development to go to Walmart instead of going all the way down to 10. I'm more concerned about the road out by Morgan and the wear and tear on that road, because that'll be the main thoroughfare from the turnpike into the development for both communities. They could go down to the cul-de-sac, but I assume that's where they're going to put the apartment.
Well, that is a good question as far as, that road, it is gonna receive more wear and tear. It's already not very bad.
What?
It's on Willow Glen.
Yeah, sorry, Willow Glen Road.
Their proposal realigns Willow Glen and actually reconfigures it so that whole section.
But I mean, from there down to Morgan Way.
Right.
Is a cart path at best.
Yes.
Well, I do wanna clarify something. I'm not totally against residential. We had talked before at other meetings. A 1 acre lot, deeper driveway, you get 4, 6, 8 cars in your driveway. You know, bigger lots, I'd be okay with single family dwellings. But the high density housing, I don't think works there.
I agree.
Lynn, did you?
Yeah, I just, for reasons I've stated previously, I think this is a good solution for the township for that space. And I agree with, I think Brian, you know, it's like traffic is going to happen. So this isn't a decision about traffic or not. Traffic is gonna happen no matter what happens on that space.
What kind of traffic studies we're gonna do on that road coming out from the turnpike down 10 into the development there? Because it's already 20 miles an hour. I can tell you people do 40, 50 through there already. Just increase the volume. You're waiting for an accident on that turn.
Whatever development goes in on that property, we'll have to have a traffic study.
But a study doesn't fix anything.
No, it just
It just
tells
tells
you
you
how
the
much
problem.
traffic and what
How much
improvements
they
may be
increase.
necessary to
To
the
reiterate,
goal.
what they have proposed is, they wanna, at the end of Willow Glen at 23 in the Turnpike Bridge, they would like to, for all intents and purposes, cul-de-sac that road, close it off, and make another new main road that goes, if I'm not mistaken, out around the outside of their development, out to the red light across from Lowe's. So the traffic going to 23 would be redirected to a red light. But you still have the traffic going from the apartments to the turnpike using Willow Glen.
Correct. And I think it's a good idea to put it down at that light from where it is now, because it's hard to get out as it is.
That would be a huge improvement, because again, if they build a warehouse there, and I think of this too, if they were to build a warehouse there, or whatever business, we're gonna have traffic. And if the new, let's say another developer decides to buy in on that, put a race car museum, I don't know what it is, whatever it may be, it's gonna bring traffic. They may not wanna do that cul-de-sac, and we're still gonna have cars now, double the amount more, going out at 23 and Willow Glen, which is already a hazard,
Yeah, I think if they built a warehouse, they would go out 23 and go out the turnpike down through Morgantown.
Right. So
Because I think there's restrictions on trucks through Willow Glen right now anyway.
To address the traffic, what you explained is correct. And that was based on a brief conversation with our traffic engineer, that they're suggesting to And also the conversation was with the Turnpike Commission because of relocating, that connection from Willow Glen to 23 as a result of the bridge work. That was just an initial conversation with our traffic engineer that we all thought would be a good idea to improve the traffic. The traffic study will generate the number of trips, and along with that is suggested improvements as a result of those trips. I mean, we're going through one in Center County where the traffic engineer came back and said, you know, we have to put a turning lane in. And as they look at that, and if traffic is going to come through Willow Glen Road, there's probably going to be suggestions from the traffic study for improvements made to the shoulder, to the overlay, or things like that. So the traffic study just isn't coming back and saying, well, there's going to be 1,000 trips, you know, average daily trips of 1,000. There's going to be recommendations that your traffic engineer is also going to make that are going to mitigate the traffic that's generated from that development. So just don't want you to be confused that a traffic study is just doing a count. It also has recommended improvements. We talked at the one meeting about sequencing all the lights to have them all talking to each other to improve the flow through town as well. So they're the kind of things that are going to come out of a traffic study and will most likely result in improvements to some of the existing roads.
And who would consume the cost of these improvements? Developer would.
And I think all that sounds great, it's just the excess traffic with the density of the people living in the apartments. I think that's really, if I can speak for my community up here, it's definitely the apartments that are a concern.
I don't know if the apartments would, I don't know what, I would think that apartment traffic flow is less than residential.
Yes, because you have less revenues, you have less people driving.
So the comment was that because there's less bedrooms and less folks and less people driving, that the apartments probably will have less average daily trips than the residential portion.
But you still have the fact that more people in a condensed area, so I think that your traffic would end up probably working out pretty equal as far as trips. Because you're gonna have less people living there, but you're gonna have more people living in a condensed area. So I think your traffic study would show that that's probably pretty equal. Compared to, say, Penwood or Highcroft, I think traffic would be comparable.
You may be correct.
I don't know that to be a fact.
Until we would see the counts.
Yeah, I don't think Highcroft understands, because we don't hear the vandalism in Highcroft like we do from some of these other developments with the high density housing, like behind Elmore Chevrolet or Penwood. I mean, there's constantly stuff going on, the police are there a lot. I don't think Highcroft gets that kind of attention. Did you ever notice that? No.
But Penwood is.
Penwood's not
like-
high
but
density.
yeah, I mean, there's
It
tighter
is
housing than
once you get in there
Highcroft.
A little deeper in Lenape, on
No.
Penwood Drive,
Highcroft's
those
high
homes are on
density
big
enough.
lots, but you go in there a ways and they start getting tighter and tighter.
Well, the smallest lot's 12, so, you know.
12,000 and 20,000 square foot.
Yeah.
It was 150 acres, there's 240 houses, so that's less than 2 units per acre. That's not considered a dense.
I lived here my whole life. Everyone always had acres, not 1 acre a house, acres,
Well,
and their house was on acres.
Unfortunately, like I grew up in East Brandywine Township, okay? There, the minimum net property is 5 acres. I think it was 3 acres at 5 if you like elevation wise. You know, that's the way it's set up. We have not been set up that way. You know, I mean, a lot of this stuff we're talking about is stuff that should have been done back in 1950 when the Turnpike came in. You know, we basically now are pretty well developed. You know, now we're at that point of, okay, You know, we have a Walmart shopping center that has open stores. We have other places that are built, that are abandoned or half built, like the place over here on what, Shiloh, whatever it is. You know, we have those already there. I'm like, okay, we have one piece of property that's probably the only one really left that you could do really much of anything on. And that piece of property, you know, in my mind, it's okay, you either put on residential or you put a warehouse. Maybe.
No warehouse, this
Well,
warehouse.
IUP. Well, all right, so what's on IUP? It's a commercial property. So,
Hillside that was just in here to get the approval to build under.
would you want that next to your $400,000 house?
It wouldn't be next to it, it'd be
They
down
would
on
never
the
be
rock
able to
though.
afford to put something like
I
that.
know, that's the other thing, is the cross
They'd never be
ratio.
able to afford to put a machine shop on the
Oh, yeah,
airport
right.
property.
The
How
cross,
much did they buy for, how much did they spend on their property?
well, that property's
How about
high
millions?
value because of the last people that
No,
wanted
it's
it.
millions.
You know, that property's not gonna be a cheap piece of property, that airport. And that's something else you have to look at, like,
It's not
who's
that-
really going to wanna spend the money on that property? And be something we really want. Do you know of anybody? We're not getting Cabela's, so they're,
We
even
will
they're not
find
even really
out.
business anymore.
We will find out, but just giving away the farm because you're afraid of the possibility of a warehouse moving in.
Yeah, I don't was giving away a farm. I don't know, I would say that. I think not being willing to have your eyes open for possibilities is giving away the farm. That's my personal opinion.
We have possibilities right now. I'm just saying this isn't the one
Mr.
that
Chair,
I would like.
can we poll the planning commission now to see where we stand if we're moving forward?
First, well, all right, so our next step is to get the verbiage correct that we went over
Yeah.
tonight.
Well, I think
That
the
would
point is
create
that they wanna find out.
communication between you and them.
Yeah,
I think
so-
we wanna
so
find, I
if
mean, we
there
don't
is-
wanna keep kicking the can down the road.
Right.
I mean,
costs
we
both
wanna
parties
know
more money.
if we work out these terms, we're moving forward. Or at least have the planning commission's recommendation.
To put it another way, is there any set of circumstances that if you reach agreement with Berks for it to put in the zoning ordinance, you would find residential palatable? So is there any set of circumstances? If you're sitting here saying that there is no set of circumstances where you would like to see residential move forward, then we're engaging in an exercise of futility. Trying to draw up set conditions, put in a zoning ordinance that will never be palatable. So what I see is the commission split 2-2, and Jeff's still considering his position.
But basically, you're proposing similar to what we have. You don't want wider streets.
Mr. Steyer, I think at this point, we've heard you, we understand your position. I think we want the board's full decision at this point.
Well. I feel like saying that I can't confirm or deny, but.
You can't abstain.
I would say, can we go one more step and see where that goes? Let's get the wording right.
I need to confer with my clients on that for a minute, because we're spending money every day. And if we don't have at least a relatively clear direction that this is gonna move forward, I think he has to know.
Do you have some other business? You wanna move on to your next thing, and just, if we could just caucus, if you wouldn't mind, if that's okay? Is the chair okay with that?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I didn't get any comments from anybody, so, I think really more than likely, I think people have had other things that they needed to do. We do really need to decide on something, so if you could, for next month, at least, if you have any comments, email me. And then we can try and put it to bed, one way or another.
Maybe we could have somebody buy the airport property and put a petting zoo. That will fix the whole problem.
For the plan review chart?
Yeah,
New on here,
I think the lot 2A and 2B is dead. Cause isn't
was
that
that
where
the,
the Service
Yeah.
Electric went?
yeah.
Mm,
Was that one?
No.
I thought that's different.
It's different, yeah.
Well, it was the
two-
hotel.
You had, I have to get my notes now, it's a good question, but it is a different project.
Yeah, I thought that was the hotel.
Manufacturing.
Maybe it was,
But if
it goes
that-
back a little ways.
Yeah, but if it's a hotel, then that's the site that Service Electric went on.
Yeah, I'll have to confirm with you.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll bring that next time,
Yeah.
okay.
And I'm not sure the lot 4A Heritage Drive might be the one that Mr. Stokes was talking about tonight. So that would mean this plan from 2018 is dead and we get something else coming in on that same one.
You want me to take it off this chart then?
I would, yeah.
Okay.
And then Viwinko is done, I mean, the plans are being signed, and Hollywood Casino is done and being signed, or been signed, so those could probably come off.
Here's a question on Heritage. Wasn't there another project on Heritage besides the Iron Mountain and?
There was that plastic.
RPC.
Yeah, that one died.
RPC, that one?
Yeah,
Okay.
RPC died.
Okay. Because I know people were saying people were out there doing stuff. I'm assuming it's Iron Mountains doing specs for that plan, I'm thinking, but I'm not 100% sure.
And that, I believe that's who's down there.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. It seemed right by the drawing.
Yeah, I
That's-
saw them out there the other day.
Yeah, everybody's been asking. Everybody thought it was by Winco. I'm like, by Winco's by Winco.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
So Terry, do the revised casino plans need to be reviewed by anyone here?
No, I mean, the casino plans are,
Right, the subdivision was done, but
Right.
apparently there's
oh, you
changes
mean
inside.
okay, yeah, no, the building plans don't need to be reviewed by the planning
Got
commission.
it,
Yeah, that's actually being reviewed between Technicon and us right now.
got it. The second one I see if I got the plans.
I just got them by email today,
Okay,
and I put them on a thumb drive to have Frank deliver it to Technicon tomorrow.
great.
So,
Thank you. Yeah.
yeah, the casino, basically because of all the growth of the internet gaming, has revised the whole public side of the casino. Instead of having 2 restaurants, there's now 3. They added on a couple of outside porches so that people can sit sort of in under a roof but outside and do online gaming. It'll be really nice. The big restaurant got scaled down a bit. The kitchen stayed the same size because they think that eventually they will want to go back to a higher end restaurant. But initially the restaurant will be, I mean, there's actually 3 inside, so.
There's a total of 3 restaurants, I'm sorry.
Yeah, 3 places that you can get eat
Right.
food, yeah.
Okay.
We're back, and we will take Mr. Vickers' suggestion. If the board will authorize Mr. Brown to prepare a revised ordinance based on the base ordinance that we provided, we'll look at it and revisit the issue here.
I have to comment to you, been doing my due diligence on this, proposed development. I've been talking to people from Berks County, what's their suggestion, what is their thoughts? I've been talking to planning commissions and supervisors from other townships, you know what I mean, as far as to what Berks County's foresight is, and thoughts. So I have been doing my due diligence, I'm not sitting here just taking up your time. And I don't know if all that information is helping or hurting, you know what I mean, but I have been doing my due diligence, and now I have new questions I'd like to ask, so, again, I've been talking to other townships that are right next, adjoining ours, as well as people that are on their planning commissions or supervisor boards and Berks County, to find out what their thoughts are as far as rooftops. We keep talking rooftops. So I've been talking to people. I'm not just sitting on my hands costing me money for what it's worth.
So, are we in agreement that Mr. Brown is authorized to revise the ordinance based on the discussions tonight and further discussions with you?
Yes.
And he'll send it to me to review, okay. All right, thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time.
I had one public comment that just came through. They want to know, is there a consideration for restaurants instead of the apartments? I guess the gentleman is still
Well, there's
concerned about apartments.
Well, we have commercial, space that we're reserving specifically for commercial space. A restaurant could be a possibility, but we don't have any end users now. The restaurant would not replace the apartments.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
We got zoning reviews, renaming IOP.
That's kinda
On
on hold until
This, it's redundant with this.
Yeah.
The purpose of renaming it was to address.
Great, we have it covered for now.
Yeah, so I mean, I might have asked before, I guess I just wanna make sure, cause I think before it was discussed that maybe we would call it like mixed use or.
This
Well,
development goes through, we don't need any more residential and IOP, I wouldn't think.
Yeah, actually, if they do decide not to pursue it, then it is something that we probably should work on and
Yeah.
look at it. But
If
if
this goes through, let's work.
it goes through, then that really doesn't matter anymore.
Okay, thank you.
And just on future projects, we had ordinance codification, so guess we can get to that in the future. Any planning commission member comments?
I have nothing.
I'd like to say that, basically, yeah, we didn't have Walmart before Penwood, but we had Farmer Brown's. We had Turns Hardware before Lowe's. We had alternatives. We have Walmart and Lowe's now, but we had alternatives. We weren't without places to go to buy things before that. But, my concern is, still, they're pushing for these small streets. And we've had complaints for years about the tight streets.
I mean, they're not pushing for anything that's not already in the ordinance, I mean, that's what we have
This
spec out.
ordinance was never considered before in IOP, only in residential or,
Right, but that's
zoning
for,
as an
that's what
overlay.
they're building is residential.
Yeah,
So
but
they're getting
this
that
district
street
that we're
width.
looking to put the overlay in is a commercial district. And all the others that it was used in before was in residential or allowed to be put in before were residential.
Their uses by residential are 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
This is IOP with an overlay.
I
It's
know.
not residential.
Yeah, but they're building a residential development, so they're using the specifications from the residential.
I would have preferred, okay, they wanna work with us, okay, half-acre lots, set back the cars so people can put 4 cars in their drive and not have to park
They
in the
told me
street.
within the first 5 minutes that they were here the first time, that wasn't even a remote possibility. So
Yeah,
it's
but
not
then they're
worth
saying they're
discussing.
looking to work with us, you can't have it both ways, it has to be their way, but they're looking to work with
Well,
us.
that's what you're saying.
That's a
Same thing.
conflict of what they're
You're saying
saying.
it has to be your way, and you're saying the
I'm
same
saying
thing.
if you're asking us to change the zoning in a commercial
Right,
district
but they,
to accommodate your,
but why would they bother
Your
asking to
project.
change it in a way that didn't work for them? Like, why would they do that?
Cause they
It makes
come
no
here looking
sense.
to work with the
But they
community.
can't
they're
do
the
that.
township.
They would not be able to the project wouldn't financially make any sense.
Well, I
They
believe
couldn't afford to buy the property.
Hillside, that's a very successful business and they don't have a lot of traffic that goes in and out
But
there.
that lot probably didn't cost $5 million.
I'll bet it cost a couple, yeah, at least. Yes,
With the
and the
construction.
building,
No,
yes.
but the lot itself.
If I remember right, their letter of credit or escrow was like $400,000. They are there's other businesses like that that could go on that property that would be very successful and a low impact to the community.
Where are they?
Give
Well,
it
that was my
time.
point, I mean,
The guys
now
that-
you're starting to see those lots pick up where you didn't see that before.
Yeah, but I don't think that, okay, but find out what the guy paid for that, what Merle paid for his lot over there. I bet you it wasn't the same price as they're paying for the airport
That
property.
airport property is a very valuable property because
Right.
it's so flat. Somebody will pay a premium for that and use it for something other than low-income housing,
It's not
basically.
low-income
Or
housing.
high-density housing.
It's not low income housing.
Compared to
$300,000
Highcroft
homes.
it is.
What?
Compared to Highcroft it is.
Compared to Highcroft, no, it's not.
Yeah, I would
They're
think
talking
so.
$300,000 single family homes. The houses in Highcroft go for a little over 300.
You're talking 144 units apartments? Well, guess what? You get two people that work at Morgan Trailer and they live together and they split the rent, okay? From Reading, so they don't have to drive
You
down
think that a guy
everywhere.
that works like in the Morgan Trailer shop is gonna be able to split rent on a $1,500 apartment?
1,400 they said, and that
I
could
don't
come
think so.
down too. You know how that changes.
I don't think so.
I seen a lot of these developments over the
Well, now,
years.
I don't know.
Going in, it was one thing. After a couple of years, everything changes. Yup.
Like there's 2-bedroom apartments in Morgantown, just an upstairs
Yeah,
and
yeah, let's
downstairs.
say it's a guy from Morgan Truck. He wants to split an apartment. You think he's gonna split the $1,500 a month apartment or the $700 a month apartment? that's
There's
going
no
on?
$700.
Or whatever it is, it's gonna be 1,000, it's not gonna be
It's
50.
$1,200 to $1,400.
Yeah?
For a
That's
2-bedroom.
77, yeah.
I don't know.
You don't get any place for under 1,400 much anymore, anywhere. Go ahead, Aldo.
Okay.
You say you have nothing, Roger?
I don't have
Sorry.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that one. Second.
Alright,